Okay, and welcome to Hashem's podcast on Monday morning in Australia, 1 a.m. in Cairo. Today we're going to be speaking to the velvety voice of George Donikian, who's one of many that many can't forget. His persona in television and radio, and he's been admired for so many years and is still admired because you can still listen to him on 3AW Melbourne Talkback Radio. He's an icon of radio and television with a history spanning back to the 70s with radio station 4am in far North Queensland, and then 2WL in Wollongong and 2WS in 1979. George did talkback radio on 5AA in Adelaide also in 2004. He covered the Athens Olympics for Melbourne commercial radio. So the history goes on and on and on. And I was just having a chat with George before we began, and he said, don't read the whole bio, let's talk about it. And ask me, make it all sound natural. I'm going to try. I'm talking to a legend here, guys, of radio and television. So good morning, George.
Morning, Mo. How are you?
I'm a bit intimidated.
No, don't be intimidated. Listen, this is the beautiful thing about technology. It gives us access to people and to situations and experiences that in the past we would never have had a chance. Can you imagine if I'd had this opportunity to reach out and speak to, say, my heroes? Yeah, I'd be like you, a little bit nervy, but I'd be excited too. So let's just enjoy it. And can I just say, I remember doing talkback for John Tingle on 87 2GB a lifetime ago, when I was still in Sydney, and John Tingle thought it might be nice to give this young media guy at SBS a bit more exposure on radio in Sydney.
Yeah, what a history. So
it was fun.
Let's begin from the beginning. So family came over from Greece in the late 40s?
Yeah, Dad arrived in 49 from Athens with his father in tow, his stepmother, his grandmother, and his wonderful sister, Sirvat. It was a party of 5, and they came out on an Italian ship. And eerily and poetically, my father and his party got out of war-torn Greece, and this is after the Greek Civil War, on a Turkish merchant vessel. And I use that description on purpose because my forebears on my father's side had fled Turkey to make their way to somewhere that would be safer.
Yep.
So they were from Asia Minor. They were Christians, Armenian in background. And to think that years later my father would seek shelter in a Turkish merchant vessel on its way to Alexandria, where they'd pick up an Italian ship. And again, that's potent stuff because...
Was it the Marconi? Was it the Marconi ship?
No, it was the Sebastiano Cabotto,
okay.
Sebastian Cabot. And the reason I say that is because it was a warship, an Italian warship, that managed to retrieve and save my grandfather from Smyrni, the burning of Smyrni. He swam out to the warship, which was lying in the harbour, along with a British and a French vessel. Yeah. They were trying to maintain their neutrality in a difficult time. But the Italians, unlike the British and the French, decided to take him on board, and they let him go to Mytilene, to Lesbos. And from there, he made his way to Greece. So it's interesting how the Italians have come and been part of our history and have helped us on a couple of occasions. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this, Mo.
That's it. And growing up in Australia with Greek origin, what was the interest in media? There was something that I read about your dad wanting you to be a lawyer or a doctor, or don't do media.
Like every ethnic family, I think even today, young parents aspire for their child to be given every opportunity, whether it's a boy or a girl. Do you want them to be a doctor? Do you want them to be a lawyer? Do you want them to be a scientist? That's what they all aspire to, and my parents were no different. And remember, when my father arrived in Australia, There was no such thing as television, right? That came in 56 and Dad arrived in 49. Radio was not really open to the ethnic communities of Australia, certainly not in the 50s and 60s. And it was still a long way away before we saw the arrival of SBS radio, which would be 77. And of course, SBS television didn't arrive till 1980, despite all the publicity last year telling us it was 50 years of SBS. I kept saying to people, no, it's not. It's a little bit of PR that SBS is doing to try and give itself a little bit of colour.
Yeah.
There was no 50 years of SBS radio last year. It was more like 48 years of radio.
48 and a half.
Yeah, and of course, SBS TV will be 50 in another 4 years. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So who were your inspirations growing up? Were you listening to any other sort of country?
No, we were playing records in those days on turntables and on beautiful old bits of furniture that sounded wonderful. The old radio was short wave, or it was medium wave, or it was, we didn't know what ABC was. We didn't access it. And if we did, it was for a little while, because in my early days, I didn't speak any English. A lot of our home was filled with music, and it was filled with the records, the 78s that my father and mother had brought with them or were buying at the time. And that was how the world was entertained. They read newspapers, they listened to their turntables, and they gossiped amongst their community. That's how people learnt anything. Today, of course, we have Facebook, which not only connects our community, but connects us to the world and gives us an opportunity, as you're proving, Mo, to do a podcast in real time, live streaming, accessible anywhere in the world.
In the world, yeah.
That's unreal.
Yeah, the word live is...
That's fiction. That's fiction.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah,
Science fiction.
To go live on air on television or radio was a big deal. It's like, we're live on air.
Still is. It still is, because it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
You need to understand that right now you're publishing, you're producing, and it's incumbent on you to make sure that whatever we say is fair, is reasonable, and it doesn't promote or foment trouble or discord. And it's also important that we don't push a particular line of propaganda, which is so easy to do in this world where everyone suddenly is an expert on everything.
Yep, definitely. Everyone's got their own opinion.
Yeah. It took me about 7 years to have my first opinion in the SBS newsroom. And that was after 7 years of just shutting up and listening to all the people that actually knew what they were talking about. And I was intent on learning as much as I could. And I think that's the best advice for a great many people. If you don't know about something, listen, ask, and keep asking questions. And it's not always as it seems. That's right. Yeah.
So before the SBS, you were on radio for many different radio stations.
Yeah. I had to leave Sydney. Imagine, young Sydney boy, born and bred. In Sydney's eastern suburbs. We'd spent some time in the western suburbs, and that's where I think I made my first foray into a public school at Western Ryde Primary. But I arrived there, Mum tried to enroll me, but her English wasn't the best. And the teacher at the time said, or the headmaster at the time said, "Mrs. Donikian," and Mum has only just passed. We lost her last week. So she was this bright young woman, fresh in Australia, in Sydney, trying to understand what was going on. And she said, "I'd like to enroll my boy." And they said, "Yes, Mrs. Donikian, we're halfway through first term. Can you bring him at the beginning of term 2 or next term?" she nodded and went home and brought me back a year later. She didn't understand that the term was only a month or so away. So I didn't go to school as a 5-year-old. I went to school as a 6-year-old with still no English. So it was a really exciting time. But it was illuminating.
Was
There were
that
some
because you were
wonderful
going
people.
to, was that like Greek school? You were going to Greek school and everyone was talking Greek at home and
Yeah, we spoke Greek, we spoke Armenian, we spoke Turkish,
oh, you spoke
depending whether it
Turkish
was
too. Wow.
grandma. Oh yes, depending
Wow.
depending if it was grandma or great grand. My great grandmother, Marise, who survived the Ottoman purge and had so much oral history to pass on to me, and she did. She, whenever she would take us for, a walk around the park, she'd put us in the, my brother and I, we would be in the pram. Stephen would be in the pram. I'd be walking alongside because he's 22 months younger than I. And Grandma was so traumatized by the events of the time, she would only speak in Turkish. She didn't want to give people any idea that the children were Christian. You follow?
Yeah.
And she would speak to us in Turkish. So we would get a grasp of what was going on. She'd sprinkle it with Greek, she'd sprinkle it with Armenian, but primarily she would speak to us in Turkish and give us a sense
That's
of
incredible.
how difficult times were. Dad
Oh,
was fluent in Armenian, in Turkish, in Greek, because he was born in Athens. His French was a language that he loved and he learnt. Of course, Greece was occupied twice by the Italians first and the Germans. So Dad, for survival, learnt both languages. And when he came to Australia, he had a notebook in his front pocket, which he would fill every day with a brand new word. And he taught himself English. And his English was so good, I used to have friends say to me, "So what school did your father go to?" And I'd go, yeah, School of Hard Knocks.
that's it. School of
Dad
Hard
was
Knocks.
a,
Yeah.
was a businessman, was an automotive engineer.
Yep.
He was a magician. There was no engine he couldn't repair or he couldn't understand. There wasn't a car or a truck or a motorcycle or a boat or a plane engine that my father couldn't
Wow.
repair.
So he was a
And
lover
he
of
taught me to
knowledge. Yeah.
fly. He taught me to fly when I was 15.
Wow.
He taught us to be brave. He taught us to drive cars, ride motorbikes. He wanted us to learn from in his hands. He didn't want me to learn with my mates, taking risks, you follow? He was always that wonderfully rich, nourishing, protective father. And the best part about my mother and father were that they were the magnificent couple. They were two equals. My mother, I keep saying to people, and I've got to do the eulogy next week at the funeral, and I think one of the lines I will use because it's real. Mum didn't need to read The Female Eunuch. Germaine Greer didn't need to talk to my mother. In fact, Germaine Greer would have been a little baby when my mother was making her way in Australia. My mother wasn't a feminist, but she didn't need to be a feminist. She was her own woman, strong, brave, had lost two brothers and a father during the war and during the Greek Civil War. And she had arrived in Australia and would bring her other two sisters and her mother. So she was one of three sisters in Australia.
Yep.
And I'm named after her youngest brother, George.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
lovely.
special time.
Definitely. Definitely. So condolences for your mother
Thank you.
and the whole
Thank you.
family.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for being on. I mean, it only happened last week, so we appreciate you being on the show. So, how did you learn English in primary school? What was that like being in primary school back then and not speaking English yet? What was that like?
It was illuminating. Let's just say that. A lot of people thought I was this arrogant so and so that I wouldn't speak to them. They just didn't understand that I didn't understand what they were talking about. So no
Wow.
point responding if I didn't know what they were talking about. But I do remember little things that get up my goat. And one of them was the nursery rhyme, Georgie, Porgy, Pudding and Pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. And I kept thinking, why would a girl cry if I kissed her? I had no idea. it was such a bad thing. And lo and behold, it's stuck in my craw. I don't want to make people cry. I certainly don't want to make women cry. And if I kiss them and I make them cry, that's terrible. So I've had to live with that scar. Mo, it's just, it takes a
Wow.
toll. It takes a real toll, my friend.
Yeah, and then you feel behind. You feel like you're really behind everyone else. So was that like a
Correct. Yeah.
determination that I'm going to be great at English to the point where I'm going to be one of the greatest broadcasters in Australian history, or
No,
how does
no,
that
no,
happen?
no. I had two gorgeous teachers, among many others. Uh, Ken Bridle was my primary school teacher, and he taught me that about how exciting history could be. And Susan Perrone was my English teacher, and you remember their names because they were so vital and so special in your life. I remember a lot of other names too from teachers who weren't nearly as exciting, but they were all strong characters. And of course, teachers in those days could be strong, even stronger, um, because they had access to a thing called discipline, something that I understand schools today struggle with. Now, you know what it's like, Mo. You get a class of boys or get a mixed class,
Yep.
especially at certain ages, and they can be terrible.
They can be cruel,
And you
can't they?
need you need to be able to discipline them. And I
Yep.
don't mean beating them. I don't mean knocking them around. I don't mean hurting them, but I mean disciplining, having the ability to say, you're not going home at 3 o'clock like everyone else. You're going to stay behind, and you're going to serve some penance, or you were mischievous, and we told you that once, twice, three times, if you didn't improve, you'd be you would have to suffer the cane, and the cane would be 6 strikes, 6 cuts of the cane.
Yep.
They weren't there to hurt you, but they were there to wake you up and to make you understand that, hey, in this day and age, we need to work together, and you're openly being defiant. Now, how do you work in a classroom today if there's an obstreperous child, or a child, as we keep hearing, is suffering from an excitement level? Maybe they have too much, what is it, ADHD.
ADHD.
Yeah. I think that condition has existed forever. We just
Oh
didn't
yeah.
call it ADHD.
Yep.
We called the child rambunctious. We called it restless. We called it a lot of things. But we had to get over it. We had to school them. We had to bring them in. We had to discipline them. I struggle with the idea that teachers have virtually no ability to do it, other than a stern word, and that's not getting the job done. And we're hearing it time and again, and we're seeing a whole generation of children. But thankfully, there's also a great new generation of young men and women who are realizing that if you want to get ahead, if you want to make a difference, it's good to be able to listen and to take some advice, and maybe do as you're instructed to do, and follow up on those lessons, because they are at the end of the day strong life lessons, or can be.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I never had an idea that I'd end up having a career in broadcasting. It never entered my mind until many years later, when my sporting aspirations were put out of the way. I suffered what they called a dislocation of the shoulder. It became chronic. They didn't diagnose it early enough, and by the time they did diagnose it, my shoulder was really damaged. And that put paid to my cricket aspirations. I wanted to play for Australia. I wanted to
Wow.
play football for Australia. I wanted to be an
Australian
athlete. I
AFL or
wanted to be an
soccer?
athlete. I was a champion at state level at school. I was a cricketer, state footballer, and state athlete.
Oh,
I was a member of the Randwick Botany Harriers in Pagewood. I was a member of the Randwick Cricket Club. I played for Pan-Hellenic and for Sydney Olympic in the early days, when I thought that was my go-to place. That's what I was going to do. And it wasn't until those injuries that I had to look elsewhere, and I was a very angry young boy. And I think that's where I followed up someone's suggestion at a party. Mate, you ever considered a career in broadcasting? You have a good voice.
you have a
And
great
I
voice.
thought, what? I didn't know what that meant. And of course, then as I started to think about it, I started to dare myself to do it. And lo and behold, I heard on radio. It's interesting about advertising. Eh? The advertising's there all the time, but it only works when you really need something. So advertising works when it strikes a chord. Those ads play all the time. And I keep saying to people, why should I advertise? Well, if you have the right product and you know how to get a message across and advertise, somewhere along the line, it will strike a chord and it'll give you the response you want.
Yeah.
And that's what I discovered in those early days. So it was if you're hearing all those bells and whistles, don't be intimidated. It's one of the service team from one of the many providers, maybe Amazon, delivering something at the door. So apologies for the extra noise.
No, we can't hear anything.
It's
No,
You
there's no
can't. Oh,
sound.
that's
No,
good.
no. Yeah, yeah,
That's good. The joys of modern technology. The filters are working.
yeah. So there's been a lot of, you're talking about education before. There has
Yeah,
been a lot of research that some children need to stand up and walk around to learn. They don't need
yeah.
to, they can't just sit
They
down for
process
8 hours.
differently.
Yeah. Interesting. So,
Oh, the world's about learning. The world's about learning. I
yeah,
advise anyone. The only recommendation: keep learning. Don't
don't stop
close
learning.
yourself
Yeah,
off to ideas,
yeah, exactly. So
and
when you were,
don't be afraid. Fearless, like you, Mo. Fearless.
that's it, I try.
Ask and you get.
That's it. So
Yeah.
when you were told you have this fantastic, this really strong bass voice that's really relevant for radio,
Mm, mm.
um, what was the deal then? Like, what did you have to do? Did you have to study, or did you have to
No,
listen to a
no,
lot of
no.
recordings? Or
I need to go back a couple of years. I had a terrible stutter, and I stuttered because my brain would get ahead of my tongue, and I would hear something and be translating it in Greek, Armenian, or Turkish, and by the time it came out, it would be stuttering. So I had to learn to slow myself down, and by slowing myself down, I reached a restful tone in my voice that suddenly became the platform that allowed me to speak. And by that time, I went to a radio school at 2SM in Sydney. Um, they had a guy called Bob Stewart who was on my Facebook. Bob is actually on my Facebook to this day. And he was the first guy. He was a wonderful broadcaster, as I remember him, at 2SM in Sydney. And he was in that class and he said, stand up and introduce yourselves. And in that class, imagine Bob Stewart had yours truly. For the very first time, he also had a guy called Doug Mulray.
oh,
Remember Doug Mulray,
oh yeah,
the
of
great
course.
FM
Yeah.
star?
Yep.
Imagine John Stanley, who's on
Wow.
radio today,
Wow.
in the first class, think, and a guy called Macca. Remember the ABC guy, Macca in the morning on
Oh yeah. Yep.
Sundays?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So in that class, Bob Stewart had four guys who would go on and make a career for themselves.
Wow.
So he did a pretty good job, didn't he?
So what was the education like? Was it like be careful of your P's and Q's, around your O's, and was it all that or?
No, no, it was a case of, as I touched on earlier, remember I said to you, don't read it, tell it.
That's it.
And the advice was something that stuck deep in my subconscious. And I take whatever information comes my way and I try and process it in a fashion. Now, if I understand it, then I can parlay that onto you and make you understand it. And that's what helped me in television. I had no television experience when I walked in to do this audition for what would one day turn out to be SBS. Because when I walked in, what turned out to be SBS was the I.M.B.C. It was an audition for the Independent Multicultural Broadcasting Corporation.
Oh, okay. Yep.
That Bruce Gyngell thought would be a goer. He thought he had just come back from Britain, where he'd made an awful lot of money for a guy called Lord Lou Grade. They'd introduced breakfast television to Britain, and it had made a lot of money, and it was a wonderful idea. And he came down under to introduce it to Australia. But while he was here, the Prime Minister, Malcolm Fraser, had just taken over, and he said, I want to provide a platform and a voice for the ethnic communities of Australia. What can we do? And with that in mind, they set out to create the I.M.B.C. But when the commercials got wind of it, they wanted to stymie and stop it, and they promptly did. They did that in the Senate. We were stillborn. We were counted out. We were denied an opportunity to start. So the Prime Minister said to Gyngell, what do we do now? And the famous retort was, you're the Prime Minister, introduce the Special Broadcasting Act, which had been around for radio. You see?
Yeah.
So they thought, let's use this quasi-government entity that we're running, sort of half radio with, and add a television arm to it, which is easier said than done, because no one wanted a new television station in Australia. And when I say nobody, I mean the commercials didn't want it, and the ABC didn't want another competitor. God forbid, we have competition. How dare you think like that? So when
back
we
then
came
it was only
along,
channel, was it 10, 9, and
Channel O. Well, in Sydney, we had Channel 10,
yep.
Channel 9, Channel 7, and the ABC. There was no thing called O. But in Melbourne, there was a Channel O, but no Channel 10.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
they had O, they had 9, they had 7, and the ABC. And suddenly we were offered up as this new Channel O. But in Sydney, trying to move Sydney, imagine you're trying to change ideas and attitudes now. Imagine how hard it is.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine how hard it was
Back
nearly
then.
50 years ago when you're saying to them, oh, by the way, your TV is going to have to find O, which was a number they didn't go to before. So they had to tune it in.
Yeah.
And if they didn't have a tune in and they had a dial, they had to go to that and see if there was a test pattern. And then because of Sydney's topography and the politics of the day, the ABC wouldn't give us pride of place at the top of the tower, because people need to understand that television works. The higher the tower you are, the further you can broadcast your signal. And the ABC didn't want us anywhere near the top. Their view was, we can stick you on the first floor and whatever you can do, good luck to you. So the government had to fight off this new charge of tokenism. So they thought deeply, and what do you think they came up with, Mo? UHF, ultra
UHF.
high frequency. But in Sydney, ultra high frequency suddenly became known as ultra hard to find. So we not only had to make our way, but we had to do it with a few obstacles and obstructions thrown at us. So that worked two ways. It made us work harder, and it made us work closer together. So we became this really tight family that doesn't happen in television a lot.
A lot. Yeah, there's a lot of
But that gave us
competition
the energy and the impetus. Well, the egos and the desire to be at the top. Everyone wants to be at the head of the platform. Well, some have to wait. Some have to serve an apprenticeship. Some have to bide their time. And that's where the dynamics become really interesting. I didn't discover that until I got to Channel 9, where it was the number one television station in Australia, owned by Kerry Packer and then by Alan Bond.
Wow.
And watching those two guys, I love them both for different reasons. They had their strengths and they had their weaknesses, but they gave me an opportunity to be different, to be better. And yeah, it didn't quite work out at 9 the way I wanted, because the man who brought me across, Sam Chisholm, was taken away and by Rupert Murdoch. Have you heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
Murdoch took him and brought him to Britain, where they introduced the English Premier League. Imagine, David Hill, who brought the winning cricket platform or focus to Channel 9, was the man that, with Sam Chisholm, went to Britain and created the English Premier League, that is the number one sporting platform in the world today. And they then went on and made Fox News and Fox Sport big in America. So those two guys, who were two champions of mine, apologised when they left, but they had to go and do something for Rupert Murdoch. So I got waylaid, I got distracted by a couple of plays out of my hands, and I had to fend for myself in a brand new world.
Yeah. What was your dealings with Graham Kennedy back then, and in that time?
Yeah,
King of comedy.
Yeah, what I didn't realise about Graham was he had been around from the very early days when I did an audition. When I auditioned in Cliff Street, Milson's
Richmond?
Point.
Oh, okay.
No, Cliff Street, Milson's Point.
Yep.
Behind Luna Park in
St
Sydney.
Kilda. Oh, in Sydney.
No,
Okay.
behind Luna Park in Sydney.
Yeah.
Right on the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
On the other side of the harbour.
I had the most beautiful office that fronted Lavender Bay. And if you look up Lavender Bay, or those people who know Lavender Bay on Sydney Harbour, they'll go, "Oh, wow, you had that office?"
Wow.
Yeah, I had Sydney Harbour.
What have you?
That was my office every day. It was a tough gig, but someone had to do it. And yeah, so when I did that audition, I understand that Graham Kennedy was in the control room watching, because he was a friend of Bruce Gyngell, and he was there and watched my progress from those early days at SBS to 9. And then he arrived just after I landed at 9, and he wanted a night comedy show with a bit of news, and I was there to do a world news at 10. So it was a clash, not one that we wanted, but one that we had to find an answer for. And the answer was, I wouldn't sit next to him on the desk and be his second banana, but I would read the news for him. And that way, we both got to play together.
What a time. It was actually a film that his first film was in 1967. It's called "They're a Weird Mob." It was actually about an Italian
mob.
Italian migrant who. There's a really funny scene where the guy's asking him, "Do you want a schooner or a middy?" And he didn't understand what that meant. So it would have been great.
There are people in Australia today that don't understand the difference.
Yeah, definitely.
Because depending on where you grow up, in South Australia, mate, it's a pony.
Yeah.
Or it's a 7 ounce. If it's in Queensland, it's a 7 ounce. It's a 10 ounce in Sydney, or a schooner, or whatever. Or it can be a pint, or it can be what's the other one? I can't remember right now. But wherever you are, what is it in WA? What do you drink in WA? Is it a 7 ounce, 10 ounce, a schooner? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
See, in Queensland,
or a jug,
if you order a schooner in Queensland, they know you're an outsider, because no sensible Queenslander will want to drink a warm beer.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it's a schooner, by the time you get to drink it, it goes warm. So it's got to be a 7 ounce. so you can scull it or drink it quickly and get another 7 ounce going. But in New South Wales, a bit different. And in Queensland, and in South Australia, again, different again. So we're not really Australians, mate. We're all a bunch of parochial pretenders to be Australian.
Every state's so different from the other.
But can you imagine how exciting it would be if we really did want to be Australians?
Yeah.
Imagine all the duplication we wouldn't have had to make.
Yep.
We'd have unified laws. We'd have standard licenses. And if you were an engineer in one state, you could work in any state.
Yeah, or a lawyer.
If you're a lawyer, the teacher, nurse, you could work anywhere in Australia. I mean, that's the principle.
I thought that's what Federation did.
No. COVID proved that we were sold a pup. COVID proved that it's everyone out for themselves. In New South Wales, you're a northerner. In Victoria, you're a Mexican. In South Australia, you're not a Victorian. In WA, you're not an Easterner. And in Queensland, you're not a cockroach. So it's there for everyone. Oh, and did I mention Tasmania?
Tasmania, Hobart, yeah. You were present at the 80th birthday of Peter Hitchener last week. And the great Peter Hitchener.
Peter Hitchener, good guy, really lovely guy, very gentle man.
Yeah.
I had a chance, met him very early on when I went to Channel 9. We used to come down and do the Graham Kennedy show, and also Sports Sunday with Max Walker. And I also used to do, Wide World of Sports with Ian Chappell and Mike Gibson. And they were great times. And coming down meant you'd go to Bendigo Street and you'd see the team and you'd meet characters. And Hitch was there. He was making his way. He'd been at the ABC and then came across to 9. And I remember John Sorrell, who was the head of Channel 9 News, ringing me up from Melbourne and saying, I want you to come down under and be number 2 to Brian Naylor.
Brian Naylor.
And Brian Naylor was like the Brian Henderson of Victoria, of Melbourne. So Channel 9 had the 2 Brians. They played the one ad, Brian Told You, and it covered 2 states, right? Brian Naylor, Brian Henderson. So that was the wonderful thing. So I knew Hitchener, but I knew him as a colleague. I knew him as a rival. And, of course, I know him now as a fan because I sit and watch Peter doing the weekend news, as he still does on the 9 network in Melbourne.
That's fantastic. So after the 9 network, you went to Channel 10.
Yeah, I left and went to Channel 10. They told me at the time they wanted to look at my contract, and I said, no, don't. If you can't honour the contract as it was written the day I signed it, David Leckie was the man who took over from Sam Chisholm, and Sam Chisholm was my mentor and the man who brought me across. When they left, David Leckie looked at things a bit differently, and I didn't like the way he looked at things. And I said, pay me what you owe me and I'm out of here. And the next thing you know, I was at Channel 10. I was at Channel 10 in Adelaide on my way, hopefully, to do the breakfast national news on the ABC in Melbourne a year later. But unfortunately, I got waylaid. I didn't realise at the time that a guy called Sir Charles Curran, who owned Perth, Adelaide and Canberra, was preparing to sell all 3 to the newly created Channel 10 network, which would put them on a par with 9 and 7. So I was told in the fine print I had to stay there, and I couldn't fulfill my obligations to come to Melbourne a year later and take over the first edition ABC News. So I had to stay in Adelaide for a little while before I made it to Melbourne eventually in 98, 99, and then ended up doing the Adelaide News from Melbourne, and then doing both newses from Melbourne. And then in, I think, 97 through to 99, I was doing much of the weekend news bulletins out of Sydney. I'd fly out of Adelaide, fly into Sydney, do the weekend news for every state, and then fly back. And people would see me at the airport, and they go, "You're getting on the wrong plane, George." I go, "Yeah, no, I'll be back in a moment." I didn't have the heart to tell them, no, we do all the news is out of Sydney.
Amazing. So
It
what
was
was
the
this?
arrival of new technology, you see, that allowed that to happen.
Amazing. What was the
Yeah.
story about having to anglicize the name into
Oh,
Donican?
well, it was a long time ago,
It's
Mo,
not a
and
difficult name. It's quite an easy
yeah.
name.
Well, see, you say Mo, but your name's Muhammad, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or Hashim. Hashim's a good
Or
name.
Hashim.
My
Now,
surname's Hashim.
imagine now, it's 40 years ago, and you want to start a career in radio in Sydney. What do you think they're going to let you call yourself?
I don't know.
A lot of I'll give you an idea.
it ends with
There was a guy called George Moore, spelt Moore.
R-E.
His
Okay.
real name was Les Pridmore, but it didn't sound too special.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So they called him George Moore. There was another guy called Bill Drake, except his real name was Holger Brockman,
Oh, wow.
right? So suddenly I come along and I say to Mike Webb at 2WS, my name is Donikian. He goes, listen, the job's yours, but we can't have Donikian. I said, so what can we have? He says, you can be George White, George Black, George Brown. Any colour George is fine by me, but
Wow.
not
Okay.
George Donikian. So I rang my father, and my father said, take a letter out, call yourself Donican, which was interesting and simple. What it did, it excited Mike Webb, and Mike said, the job's yours. I'm on air on 2WS doing this thing called the afternoon program on 2WS, and the phone rings and reception says, when you come off air, there's a call you've got to take. Someone wants you to do a job for them. So I take the call, and they've gone, George Donican. I said, yes, it is. Would you consider being the host for St. Patrick's Day? I said, what?
Wow.
They said, yeah, we love what you're doing on air, and we'd love you to come and host St. Patrick's Day, the parade in Sydney. I said, well, if you think I can do it, I'll be there. So I've rocked up that morning, 5 o'clock, early on, green tie, sharing the green ale, and George Donican did the St. Patrick's Day parade, and they thought I was one of the O'Donicans. And I did it for a number of years. And of course, that was all well and good. But about 6 months later, suddenly my opportunity to be on television. And I said to everyone, I can't be George Donican. I have to be George Donikian for television. So Bruce Gyngell goes, no problem with me. Launch yourself as George Donikian, which I promptly did. I said, welcome to the SBS World News. I'm George Donikian. And the Sydney Morning Herald writes, Donican changes his name to make it sound more ethnic.
That's
What am
incredible.
I to do, Mo? What am I to do?
You can't make everyone happy.
No.
Steve Vizard had a skit that he used to use for was it Full
Oh,
Frontal
yeah.
back then? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we were so colourful. We were so different. We gave people a
You could
reason
take the
to
Mickey
do
out back then.
caricature. Yeah. Well, they say in the
He had one
English
for
parlance,
Darren Hinch. Was it called Hunch? Was it called Darren?
he
Remember
never,
that one?
yeah, Darren Hunch. Darren never ever said shame, 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 but
Oh, didn't he?
Vizard, no.
Was that Vizard?
Vizard created it.
Oh my God.
And
Okay.
Vizard really was a very fortunate lawyer, international commercial lawyer, who was allowed to get away with doing the David Letterman show without anybody saying a word. They brought the David Letterman show virtually. They changed nothing except the names to protect the innocent. It was called Steve Vizard's the program, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't. It was the Steve Vizard show, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't David Letterman. You follow?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But because Channel 9 had the rights to David Letterman, but they never, Kerry Packer had Graham Kennedy. He didn't need David Letterman, right?
Yeah.
So it was always in the background. So when suddenly Vizard comes along, Kerry couldn't care less, really, because he was preparing Channel 9 to sell it to Alan Bond.
Yeah.
So in that time, even though he had the rights, he kept it. We were watching, when I was at Channel 9, I was watching Letterman every day via satellite. And then you'd watch Channel 7.
Letterman, very smart man he was.
Yeah, yeah. But you'd watch Vizard doing Letterman that night.
Yeah.
You follow?
Yeah, the same
which was
thing.
crazy.
Yeah.
So so it was an interesting time. And of course he created Fast Forward, the sketch
Fast
show,
Forward, yeah.
which allowed him to do all manner of different skits with different people. I think they had Eric Banner doing voices. Remember
Colin Carpenter and
did everybody.
Mark Mitchell.
Yeah. Mark Mitchell. Yeah. So they're all there.
Amazing.
So it was part of history, mate. Part of history.
Amazing. And I love history, as you can tell. I love all that era in film, in television, in radio, and you were part of that. Was there a ritual for getting ready for your shows over the years? Was there a certain thing you had to do,
We're talking radio or television?
Oh, let's start off with radio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Radio for me was your jock's journal and reading everything that you could read, being aware of what was going on, talking to advertisers, making sure that you understood the things that were happening at the radio station and wanting to be a big part of it. Television was a completely different kettle of fish. I was on a huge learning curve, and I made sure I shut up and just listened and listened and listened and read and read and read and prepared and prepared and prepared. And in those days, we didn't have the technology that we have today. Everything was manual, so even your auto cue didn't exist in the early days. So you had to read it. And
you had to read it on the table.
You had to read it in front of you.
Yeah.
As the old anchors used to do before the auto cue arrived, and then the auto cue arrived, but it was a manual one that you had to push it
turn it
through, scroll it. No, it didn't become a scroll till much later.
Oh, okay.
So it went through 5 or 6 different iterations, and of course today it comes in colors. You can auto cue now and auto roll. I mean, you can roll your own auto cue now.
Yep.
In those days, you had a person who spent all day on it, getting it ready, understanding how you worked, how you read, and the pace that you read.
Yeah.
And that was vital. And I always thought the really good ones could read your mind. In other words, they were reading and understanding, but pacing themselves to your tempo and not trying to push it through.
Yeah.
You follow?
Oh, yeah.
Which happened in the very early days and in the later days.
And then just before we do go, because I've taken a lot of your time, so you teach.
No, you're right.
You have your own media, like a centre after leaving Channel 10.
I set up a company called Donikian Media, primarily to do special projects, to do some crisis management. Yeah, and yes, to do feature docos, and we got a chance to do a 5-part travel series in Armenia, which we came back and eventually accessed SBS, and they, after a number of disagreements, they finally agreed to show it as it was, with a whole bunch of disclaimers because they didn't want to alienate the Turkish community. But as I keep saying to them, it wasn't intended, nor was it made to, create problems. It was there to illuminate and to open up people's eyes to what was going on, because it was a first glimpse, effectively, at what was once upon a time a Soviet state behind the Iron Curtain, which had now, after perestroika, after the USSR had fallen foul and had broken up, it had become a republic yet again. So the modern republic of Armenia had come alive in the late 90s. And this was, as we said in the history of the television series, the Third Republic. It was the second modern republic of Armenia. The first one went a couple of years. This one, we hope, will last a lot longer. But I did it primarily for my father and for our community and for my parents, who had always wanted us to support both communities, the Greek and the Armenian. Dad wanted us to be equal. We were, and I remain. I support the Greek community whenever I can. I support the Armenian community whenever I can. I'm not nearly as fluent in Armenian as I'd like to be. I'm infinitely more fluent in Greek. And it's interesting watching the maneuvering between the different communities, who sometimes feel offended that I'm too Armenian or I'm too Greek or not enough Armenian or not enough Greek. And I look at them and go, okay, I get it. You'd think after all these years they'd understand that I'm just doing the best I can. And I've always tried to do that for two people that I loved immensely, Andrew and Vivian, my mother and father.
God bless them.
Yeah.
George, you've been a pioneer for the multicultural voice for many years, decades, and we thank you for that, because I'm someone that, as a young boy, I won't say how old I am, but much younger at the time, looked up at you and said, I want to be like George one day, and I can't, if George can do it, maybe one day one of us can do it. And
No, Mo, you can do it. You just keep doing, you keep paying care, keep being industrious, being the
and I thank you for the
young,
support.
enthusiastic man that you are. Just
Not that
keep
young
doing
anymore.
it. You're plenty young. How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
Mid 40s now.
Mate, you're a baby. You're a baby. You know, there are people getting into their 60s and they see themselves as this is the third stage of their career.
Wow.
They're not winding down. They're edging up.
Yeah.
So my advice to you would be don't think it's passed you by. This is a brand new era. You've got more tools than you've ever had before, than anyone's ever had before. Learn to use them well and use them wisely, and be gracious and be thoughtful, and just be good at it, mate. That's all. The only advice that I give people, because there are too many people trying to tell people too much. Let them find their way, but understand why we're doing it. Understand why you're putting that slide up or that picture or that quote or whatever. And I remember, if I may use this example, years ago, I said to Bruce Gyngell, Mr. Gyngell, we've had a really exciting first year. Are we going to build another studio in Adelaide and in Perth and in Brisbane? And he looked at me and he stopped and he said, George, look around you. This is the future of television. Imagine, in 1980, he knew that we didn't need multiplication. We didn't need duplication. We didn't need to spend money on something that wasn't required. In other words, make your studio that you have, work it out, wear it out, make it 24/7, use it every day, and have not one crew, have half a dozen crews, but all working around the clock to deliver the best possible product. And unlike the ABC, which spends millions of our dollars to upgrade each and every state, why would you do that? Why? Only to promote parochialism. Yeah. And I say, my advice to everyone in this modern Australia, where everyone's telling us now we don't have enough money, my response is we do, as long as we don't throw it away, as long as we don't waste it. You don't need 50 million laws. You only need uniformity. And when you do something, right? I said to Bruce Gyngell, so are we going to have a day when every journalist is going to have a camera? And he said, maybe. What he didn't see was that every person would have a camera.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? We're
right?
all
But
we're all our
with
own
that,
media.
But with that
creative, man.
camera comes an enormous responsibility. Okay,
George
that's enough of
Donikian.
the old wives' tales
Well,
now.
I was going to say, amazing way to end it with your wisdom. I hope to get you on again one day, soon, maybe
Whenever
part
you need
two.
it.
It's been great, George, an absolute pleasure. I'm sure everyone that's been listening, we have audience from Australia, the Middle East, America, Europe, to know who you are. You're a great man for the new generation to know who you are, and you're still on 3AW. So, and that's a great institution in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Been an
yeah.
absolute
Each and every week we catch up with either Tony Moclair or Dennis Walter or one of the other staff members, and we tell stories, much like
yeah.
as we have today, which is a bit of fun.
Great fun. George Donikian, one of the legends of Australian radio and television, for many, many decades and still going strong. Thank you for your time and thank you
Thank
for
you,
being
mate.
on the show.
All the very best.
Have a great morning.
Ciao.
Bye.
Yasu.
Yasu.
Kesher, buddy.
That's it. See ya.
See you, my boy.